All right, hello and welcome to Startup Business Q&A episode 131. And it's an AMA today. We're going to do Ask Me Anything. And wow, it's been a big week since last time I was here. A lot's happened. If you've been living under a rock and not following anything I've ever done, then it's passed you by then that I was in the US for the Entrepreneur Business Live event on Thursday last week. It was absolutely marvelous to be there, and such a wonderful reception from everyone who turned up as well. So thanks so much everyone that did that. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who supported the event, everyone who watched as well. The replay came out quite well on the Entrepreneur Business group on Facebook, so that worked out really well. But I'm really keen to keep this whole thing moving, so it's not a one-off in the US. We've got lots of other things in the pipeline as well. I'm just setting things up here, but it's amazing to see that so many of you had questions straight off the bat, and I really hope you've had a good weekend. I actually flew back in on Saturday, and then I think it was, I think I pretty much managed to get to like almost 9 o'clock at night before then sleeping for 12 hours straight. So I was kind of tired, but it was a great journey. Everything went well. And yeah, so notices next week, we've got our London event. So the 6th of February, gosh, it's February already, will be an event with a special guest I'm excited to announce. And that special guest is a best-selling author of Hooked. Where's his book? Back here somewhere. So best-selling author of Hooked is Nia Ayel. Hands up if you, or give me a thumbs up if you've read this before. He's going to stream live from New York. We were actually meant to meet last week, but it never happened in the end. Logistics, right? And so he will be at the event, and it's going to be really good fun to have him streaming with a little Q&A afterwards as well. And the event will be, this is important to share here because even if you can't make it, you can watch the live stream in the Entrepreneur Business Group in Facebook. And we'll do a Q&A afterwards, but the whole thing is going to be on stimulating customer action. So I really think that Nia Ayel's, king of understanding behavior and things like that. It's going to be really good to do. I think it'll be exciting to just to kind of jam with him for a bit. And I'm looking forward to, people already started buying tickets. That's wonderful. I'm already looking forward to seeing a load of friendly London faces there too. Message here from Diana. Nice to see you here. Thanks for watching from Australia. And Diana's in the house. I can't wait for LinkedIn to have live. You'll be on 3 platforms, actually 4. No, in fact 5. Because right now I'm on 4. I'm on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and then there's the podcast that gets repurposed into audio. So then LinkedIn Live will be 5. And yes, I can't wait either. When we're live on LinkedIn, I'm just gonna destroy it. I can't wait for that. So yeah, it'd be amazing. Anyway, thanks so much for everyone. This is an AMA, so if you have any question at all about startup business or that kind of world, do share in the comments. And if there's anything you want to add, then do so. But otherwise, let's jump in. First question here is from Brian Wallace. I believe we are, hi Brian, by the way, I never got to meet him. I think it was potentially even in New York as well last week. Richard, I believe we're entering a down economy. What would you tell someone starting their business to survive in that climate? Very good question. It's something I wanted to bring up. I was speaking to someone yesterday about the down economy, and for some, it's getting them down, so to speak, because it's. I think there are scaremongers out there. But there's also people who are checking the market and watching the signs and know what they're talking about, and also fear there's a problem. And look at the history. The history books show that there will be one eventually. But let's look at the question. What do you tell someone starting their business to survive in that climate? I think there's 2 things. One is practical, and one is really positive as well. If we're going to start with the positive thing you share with someone who's starting is, if you can survive in a down economy, and I did this, so 2008 was a really tough time for many, you're going to be very robust moving forward. Many people have started businesses in the last few years and haven't experienced what it's like when bad stuff happens within the economy. And so as a result, they feel like this is as hard as it gets. It's not true. And I remember when I worked in selling advertising and selling events, advertising spend budgets for conferences and travel, they're some of the first things to go. So that was quite hard when it was a bit of a recession kicking in and everyone was tightening their belts and hibernating their budgets. So what I would tell someone who's starting out, Brian, is that if we are entering a down economy, you need to focus on actually doing the same thing as you should be doing when you're starting a new business anyway, which is looking at your oxygen. Your oxygen should be your cash flow and your clients first. Feathering your nest is a dangerous thing to do when you actually have, by feathering nest, I mean polishing the business you're creating and spending time doing things like making sure you've got the best looking logo and things like that. It's a mistake when you haven't got any money coming in. And the reason why I'm adding that this isn't the case just for a downturn, Brian, is that this should be the case anyway. Your business is fledgling, it's just starting out, and I strongly suggest that no matter what you're doing, you kick off with a focus on making sure it can survive. And the thing is, people talk about getting comfortable. I was speaking to someone recently about how they were feeling comfortable. And I said, a good way to feel comfortable isn't just when you know you're starting to be able to pay the bills and your business can, wipe its own face. It's actually going a step further than that. It's being in a place where if you lost clients, you're still in a good place. You've still got your contingency covered. And this isn't about having a plan B. This is about covering the downside, as Richard Branson said. And what I mean specifically is acting as though you might lose your best customer or your biggest customer. And if that was the case, what would happen? So this is so important because a lot of people get themselves their big contract and then that's it. And they're like, we're good. We're doing really well. I'm doing, making money. Let's focus on, the good times. But what happens if something goes wrong, in the sense that if they decide to move on or something happens that's out of your control, now there's trouble. So in the same ways that can happen with a downturn, that can just happen at any time as well. So it's good practice to have that, in mind and think to yourself, I need to make sure I'm covering all bases, including if things are going, if things are going wrong. And so the worst case scenario is covered, but also if you're doing well, then you've only got more wonderful business to handle there. So I think it's important to understand that you can't overdo customer acquisition, really, because if you have the problem that you have too many customers, well, then that's a good problem. You convert some of that cash flow into automation, or you convert some of that cash flow into outsourcing or growing a team that can help handle it. And that's an important thing to bear in mind, because if you're working, this is what I really do. If you work as though you are about to lose clients, or as if there is going to be a recession, if you work as though you might get ill in 2 years' time, what it does is forces you to a position where you say, right, how can I make things a little bit more automatic? So for me, for instance, consulting's wonderful because it makes me lots of money, but it requires me specifically. What happens if something happens to me? What happens to the family? Things like that. So those questions are best answered with a solution that doesn't require me as much. So for instance, my events, sure, for now, as kind of chief evangelist for Entrepreneur Business Live, I'm out there, spreading the word and traveling and making sure that we've got people keen on them and that we don't drop the ball. But the idea is that I'm frantically running in the direction of automation of events. So, so we move to a place where at the very least I'm a bit more at arm's length. So I'm in discussions with people in Toronto and Melbourne at the moment. There's 2 specific locations where I will not be there, but we're running an event. And that's the first step, for instance, in creating a situation where I'm not there. I think that one thing you can do to focus on right now is knowing, as we do, that there will eventually be some kind of downturn. No one knows when, but this is just life in the markets. They do that eventually. It's wise to act as though it's happening now. That doesn't mean get desperate. It's quite the opposite. It means you need to be a very abundant position. You need to be spreading the word, share great value, position yourself, do good marketing, create things that can have a flow of people into a kind of if not a funnel, then into orbit around you. Having passive income from my courses, for instance, is a great boon, but it may well be that you know, if there is a recession, that people stop buying things like that. So I need to make sure I'm diverse as well. Consulting is wonderful because I know there'll always be, the market is everyone who might work in startups, and so, or people who might work in sales or in marketing or in leadership. So I know I can always access people and put things together there. But just got to think to yourself, you know, what would you do if you lost your clients? Imagine you started at zero again. So where would you be going, and how can you get the quickest traction? These things are worth bearing in mind, and not then putting away for a rainy day when things go bad. Is actually that these things should be executed on now. I suppose what I'm saying is, sounds a bit doomsday, but act as though you've got a recession now, because nothing's more dangerous than getting complacent. Nothing's more dangerous than thinking, oh, I'm good now, we're doing really well. So it's a bit of a mistake to do that. It's just my opinion. So I want to do some shout outs here. So hi, Bob Alone, I see you on Facebook, as well as Michael Getty, Matan Gockman as well. Good to see you here. Bina's here from Wales. Matan, happy birthday for last week. Mohammed's here too. Brandon, David, Diana, Bonsai, everyone's here. It's nice to see you. And let us know, hashtag Team Live if you are watching live, or hashtag Team Replay if you're watching the replay. Also, did you come to the event last week in New York, or did you watch the live stream? If you're in the Entrepreneur Business Group, I don't want to downplay any of the other events, but it really was one of the best ones. It was fantastic. And my model for building events is not build an event, then try and sell it. It's build a community and then put an event in it. And I think that's worked so well, because most networking events you will ever go to will be ones where you walk in and you're saying, oh, hi, my name's Richard. How are you? What is it you do? And things like that. And there might be some awkwardness. And that's when you get all these questions about, how do I network? How do I engage? How do I start things? My approach is different. My approach is build a community. And without question, and I think this would be agreed by anyone who attended, I think probably 80%, as a minimum, probably more, of the attendees, there were about 40 of them, about 80% of the attendees last week knew each other. So instead of an awkward handshake, it's a hug, right? And so what matters is, because you're focusing so much on building this play of building the community, okay, we move to a place where we have people, let me rephrase this. Rather than building a bunch of connections where people kind of come together, they've actually built it as a community where there's dialogue and conversation, and it's long term, and dare I say, people are friends. And even though those people came out for the first time to see each other, they knew each other well. So there's those hugs in place. Very, very exciting to see. And it meant that there was the warmth, there was the talk about evangelizing, and this is what they were doing so much as well. And so the buzz and the receptivity is far higher, and I know it sounds arrogant, but far higher at my event last week than I've ever seen anywhere else, because it felt like a reunion. It didn't feel like a networking event, because I'm working hard on making sure I'm building a community and then selling into that. So that's fantastic. Bob Lowe's just asked about one in Australia. We're looking at Melbourne. I'm really keen, and I'm speaking with some people very soon. And Diana kind of was on my hot list for that, and we have a call in the next couple of days. I think the trade-off may be that I have to dance on camera, and in return that she might be interested in helping out build the event in Melbourne as well. So I want to announce who's speaking next week, because I officially can, because she's decided to pop online and give me a message. And the two speakers next week, I've already shared. One is best-selling author Nir Eyal, best-selling author of Hooked, and also a wonderful person that I've met almost a year ago. Yeah, I think it was March or April last year, and that's Michelle Raymond. Absolutely fantastic person. She's just fresh. Last week, I believe it was, Michelle, from her TEDx talk in Tunbridge Wells. And we're going to be talking about stimulating customer action. So no better personality than her. I urge you to check her out, and she's right there. So on the 6th, on Wednesday next week, we've got Michelle, myself, and Nia streaming live from New York with a quick Q&A with him as well. It'll be fantastic to have that. It's going to be an intimate event, so only about 20 people or so, because it's a very last minute. I really wanted to get something out the door in February, and that'll be on at 15 Bishopsgate in WeWork. in London. Of course, we'll stream live to the Entrepreneur Business Group as well. Brian, thank you for the question. It's a very good one, very apt. I think a lot of people are getting nervous about that. I suppose my response is work as though it's going to be a downturn anyway. And I suppose trying to be practical is that surviving in that climate relies on you to focus massively on customer acquisition. Sure, you've got to deliver and so on, but massively on customer acquisition, not just on feathering your nest, because otherwise you're relying too much on a passive movement towards you of customers. That's only going to work really if you've been playing the longer play of marketing, content marketing, creating a kind of a bit of a following over time. So since it's not a downturn in the economy yet, then arguably it's not moved to a recession yet. It's intelligent to work hard on building that community around you to shore you up should there be issues. Next question from Melvin Tan. Nice to hear from you, Melvin, from Singapore. Richard, what is the #1 activity any new business must do when starting out? It is the same thing, is actually massive action on getting new customers. Step before that, there's like a step 0.1 before that is your MVP. Get your product or service ready so it is at least a minimum functional level of product. For some, creating a product or service that is an MVP requires it to be quite well polished. It might be quite a luxury product, for instance. I get that. But once that's done, you should be massively focused on bringing in customers. But the thing is, you should ideally be doing the customer acquisition, or at least warming up and creating betas or whatever, whilst you're beginning the process. So I suppose my answer here is, on day one of making the decision to start a business, before I've got a product that's ready for market, I would engage with a target audience. So I would begin the process of doing that because I want to move to a space where I've got a warm set of people that I'm working with that I can then sell to when the product is ready, rather than the other way around. The mistake people make is, okay, I've got my product right, now let's try and see if anyone wants to buy it. And it's better to warm them up by documenting your climb as you go. And no better example than this than when I first launched. It was actually my first course called 8-Step Startup 3 years ago. And I warmed people up before releasing it so that I had a queue of people ready to buy. And in fact, the course was like 73 little sessions and I only had 6 ready. But the idea was that I sold that in beta because I wanted it in hands so that I could get, testimonials and advocates for the product, because that helped when I did the proper launch. So that is absolutely the main thing. Don't worry too much about logos and spending time making sure you got your lovely website. When I first started consulting, I had a PayPal link and I used Facebook Messenger. And that was it. It was ugly, but it was functional, because job one is to make sure your business can wipe its own face. It really is important, because if you naturalize at the very start, if you naturalize to not asking the question, where is my next customer every day, and focusing on acquisition, you will therefore naturalize to not doing it as much. And I strongly feel that's a mistake. That's with authority, I'm saying that, because over many years working with startups, that's where they've failed. So all in on customer acquisition. How do you do that in a world in 2019 where marketing and positioning and strong content game is important? Well, what you do is you manually engage with new people each day. When I started, I would do 20 new conversations with relevant people. So just coming into a Facebook group, for instance, 20 new conversations a day. Even if you do 5, that's 150 a month. And what happens is you engage with people, you build relationships, you find opportunities, and 1 or 2 decide to start buying things. Manual is the way to do it to begin with, because you might learn how to do Facebook ads and be epic at it, for instance. You might drop that viral bit of content and do really well. What's it called? World record egg. Last I checked, was probably a good week ago, it was over about 50 million views. And that egg, they've obviously got merchandise now. Good for them. But in the main, you can't rely on that as a strategy. So that's my strong feeling. Over on Instagram, we've got Manifesting the Concealed with underscores. Asking here, hi Richard, hope you're having a good day. Like your feed uploads, always very informative. Just wanted to ask, how can starters and beginners earn money through freelancing or whatever? Yeah, it's a really good question. It's kind of similar to what I've just said here. manifesting the concealed. I don't know what your name is as well, but I mean, you can go on things like Fiverr, for instance, and places like that. But what I do believe is that the most important way to start out if you're freelancing, for instance, or to earn money, my Monetize You course explains this inside out. It's simply go to where people are. The best way to connect with people is to do it directly. You can create a longer play of absolutely putting out great content. It's working for me to the point that essentially there's no outbound for me. It's all incoming or referrals, which is marvelous, but it takes time to build it. On day one, whilst simultaneously creating content to express what you're all about, your values, and start getting your message out to a wider audience than you can individually approach per day, I would also be approaching people individually each day. Like I say, set yourself a KPI. Okay, today I will reach a minimum of 5 people. I will start a conversation. I will not sell to them. I will not spam them with a templated message, no matter how great I think it is. It's far more important to start the conversations. And if you can have 5 new conversations with relevant people per day, over time, you can't help it. Someone will be asking you, so what is it you do? And then someone will ask you more about it because they will see you positioned as an expert because you know more about how to play guitar or develop an app or whatever than they know. And as a result, positioned as an expert, you're in a place then when they give you a cue, which is usually a compliment like, wow, I never looked at it that way, Richard. And you're in a wonderful place where you can say, okay, well, you know, here's how we can help, or would you like to explore what it might look like to do more? And that's so essential. Afreen, thank you very much. It's a great question. I hope that helps. Let's go on to another one. So Balguni Katira, who I connected with first on LinkedIn, I think. When a business is starting out, in order to make their mark, should their pricing be competitive or lower than the competition? A very good question. Thank you. So this relies on an understanding of what you're competing against. It might be you feel you're competing against competition, or you're positioning yourself differently. Maybe I am on a race to the bottom kind of product when I'm selling a kind of a pound stretch, a pound store, £1 style product shop. And it means that I need to be as cheap as possible. And so I need to be competitive with them then. If alternatively, I'm positioning myself as premium, which people are doing increasingly these days, I need to act accordingly. So to take a real world example from one of my businesses, 4 or 5 years ago when I started my Taekwondo academies, the ones that I personally ran, I positioned myself miles out of the market, so deliberately very much more a higher price than the other martial arts schools in the area, not just Taekwondo, but just in general. And the reason why was because I was positioning myself as premium because I was bringing a lot of experience. You know, if I was still doing it now, it would be 20 years. And so well, at the time, it was like 15 years of experience. I'd medaled European and national level, including gold. And, you know, and I was a 4th degree black belt. So I was an instructor with probably 10 years of instruction under my belt as well. So all of that meant that they weren't just getting someone who can teach. It was someone who can teach at a very high level. And so positioning myself as premium meant I put myself deliberately miles out of range of other people's clubs, so that it even seemed a bit weird, and it made a point. It's like looking at a Rolls Royce. It's outrageously expensive compared to the price point of a normal average everyday car, and it makes the point, because if it was slightly more expensive, it wouldn't work. But because it's so outrageous, £250,000 for a car or something, it puts you in a place where you say to yourself, well, there must be something significant to justify that price. And of course, it means you have to deliver. But what I would do is say, ask yourself what it is you're really trying to stand for. And if you're going premium like that, you need to make the point. And far too many companies put their own worried worldviews ahead of what they should really charge. And you have premium, wonderful products being hugely underpriced. And so I'm working with one in the city soon, actually, and they have a product that's probably worth 10 times what they are charging, but it's just a meekness about actually charging that. It's a bit of a mistake, in my opinion. So it's really important to change that. Brian, thank you very much for joining us on Facebook. I answered your question already. You have to want to replay, old boy, sorry. But you can catch the rest here at least. So that's a really good question from Palguni. I think the pricing should also, let's temper this with some balance here. we should need to bear in mind that the number one issue that a new business tends to have is obscurity. And with obscurity, what you need to do is get your product into hands. So what I do, for instance, if you look at Entrepreneur Business Live, the suite of events we're running as an example, I'm actively focusing myself on making sure that events happened. And in fact, on Thursday last week, I was asked by a couple of people like, is this a loss leader for you? And I said, at times it comes close to mark. We technically are in a bit of profit, but the whole point of the events is not to be dragging in loads of money as much. Of course, that's nice. It's a commercial vehicle as much as evangelizing and getting the word out. The whole point is that it's to become a movement that's beyond just networking offline, and moves to a place where there's learning as a result, with very carefully curated speakers, Michelle Raymond as an example, but also that there is a donation to a charity. So Pencils of Promise last week, who worked with schools in places like Ghana, it's really touching. There's a video going out later today on this, when I went to their offices on Friday, that'll be on LinkedIn, about the money we've raised and how the money we raised, that small amount, is more than enough to provide a water filter. So you have filtered water, like water that is drinkable for an entire school of 150 children for a whole year. And so things like that means there's meaning beyond just the attendees, you see. So we have the attendees who technically turn up. You have the attendees who are live listening in the group anywhere around the world. I think we had someone from LA, we had some people from Europe, people from all over the place. And then, of course, there's the wider set of people benefiting who don't even know the event's happening, but are getting benefits such as I say, a water filter in their school or an e-reader or something like that. And so the whole point I'm making here is that the events thrive, and the results of these events thrive when there's an abundance. If I focus on trying to capture a market only with a high price point to begin with, it can be a dangerous thing if it's a volume product I'm trying to sell. Rolls-Royces are not a volume product. Ferraris are not a volume product. Of course, they'd like to sell a lot, but exclusivity is built into their price as well. I think it's far more useful to think about what it is what you're aiming to do. If it's the kind of thing, maybe it's a consumable that you're trying to get out there, you've got to be willing to hold your breath. I'm going to hold my breath forever with Entrepreneur Business Live because I have other forms of income. But with this one, it's nice to make some money that we can then donate to charity. But I certainly believe that the plan for the next year or so is pushing the word out that it exists. So London's not enough. New York alone isn't enough. And that's why we're talking about Melbourne and Toronto. Barcelona is in April on the 4th. Dates coming very soon for San Francisco in June, for instance. So it's about spreading the word, because if there's no momentum, then it won't take. And when it takes, that's when you may see more money, for instance. So you've got to be able to hold your breath like that. I think in order to make your mark, to answer your question directly, Falguni, to make your mark, you need people talking about it. And they will talk about it if they have the product. That might be because your price point is good. It might be because you've done certain things that warm people up. So it's important to do it that way. Emma Martin, nice to see you here. Hello. Gian Giviel9225. Hello on Instagram. Idea Time Studio, Street Art Pics, Manifesting the Concealed as usual. Business banker, JLN Strategic Communications. So many of you here. Thanks so much for popping in. And yes, Brian Wallace, go premium or go home. Unless you don't go premium. I understand that. That's not always the case for all products. David Broom asks, Richard, I'm going to miss the Q&A, but I have a question to ask. What's your take on someone building their own brand, say with a view to developing a side hustle, which is totally non-competing to their full-time job or company, when they're full-time employed in a totally different industry? Can this be navigated without fallout? It's hard when you have a full-time job and your side hustles in the same place, because your people running, your employers are going to get concerned. It's confusing when you work in a full-time job and you do something completely different. Judy Fox, who spoke at Entrepreneur Business Live in New York on Thursday, is a perfect example of this. Up until recently, her work was environmental consulting, kind of this heavy industry thing. And if you look at her now, she's a video and content strategist, and a tremendously powerful one at that. And the two just don't go together. And so, of course, your profile, for instance, on LinkedIn is a confusing one at best when you're trying to cover both. My advice is to not build two profiles. I think it's a mistake. I do think you need to decide which one you're going to lean on, though, David. So, you know, if you use your profile on LinkedIn for your 9-to-5 job, well, then it should probably be used for that. I think there's nothing wrong with having a nod to the side hustle you have. But the question is, where are we going here? Is it ultimately to have your side hustle as your main thing and lose your 9-to-5 job? In which case, stick with the 9-to-5 job, make the side hustle happen, and then move over. And it may well be that the side hustle has to inhabit Facebook for an hour, for instance. It's a difficult one. And I remember when I was in Geneva in last month at Kat Dar's LinkedIn panel, this came up a lot, and it was a major concern because this was about LinkedIn for your business, and people kept saying, you know, I'm worried about pissing off my managers or team, but at the same time, I'm also concerned that if I'm producing content or talking about services that are not aligned with what I do for my 9-to-5, then I'm going to be confusing people. I think you've got to be careful about how you write things, and you need to be clear that you just write it as a point of a bio. You know, in my 9-to-5, I do this. I also do this. If there's going to be a concern about conflict of interest, we need to think carefully about what you're doing, because that's not cool with your employer. However, if there isn't a conflict of interest, then you need to have a conversation with them if you feel there's going to be an issue there. Without question, when it comes to LinkedIn, this has been it's been consistently the hardest question to answer, because there's no clear-cut strategy, because you're trying to force two things in one place. And I think the best thing to do is be as transparent as possible and put clear as day that you do both. I think the same person, Judy Fox, also did up until a point recently, she was doing video content. No, she did video content strategy, but I think she also did CV or resume stuff. She'd done that for like 6 or 7 years. So maybe if she watches this later, she can let us know. But that is it's just something you can add in. And if people dig your content enough, they'll check you out, and they're intelligent enough, they'll read it. If you make it something they have to wade through, well, then it's understandable that it will confuse them as well. So that's something to bear in mind. Hi there. I'm trying to read the names here. Sorry. Leo. Thomas probably is your name then. Leo Thomas. I think we caught up on Messenger or something recently, and you'd sent me an email about your art, which is awesome. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us on Instagram. Sorry, the names are so hard to understand on Instagram. I was just going to say, anyone who's not in the Entrepreneur Business Group on Facebook, do join, because there's a wonderful live replay of the live show from last week, from the Entrepreneur Business live event in New York. I'm really thrilled with Kurt and Judy's presentations. It was really good fun, and there's such a great vibe there. And I really feel that because we're focusing on content creation, there's some really interesting angles. So Kurt came at it at the angle of being very intentional and thinking about your story when you're building it. I was going in it as a more of a kind of a science, the sales angle as well, like what nuances are actually in play when you get people to take action, which leads neatly into next week's event. And then then Judy's one was about some real good examples of repurposing and consistency across platforms. That's very valuable. Brian here's mentioned on Facebook, people think they need to impress and show everything they do, but it makes no sense when you're trying to make it easy for people to know what you're known for. I think you're right. And I think, and this is what Brian here is talking about, is the text in your profile, for instance, maybe on LinkedIn as a good example. I think a problem is that a lot of people write words or technical phrases that they think are going to be, a great way of expressing their intelligence, or that, as you write here, they're trying to impress or show off a bit. But the problem is that it just looks cute, and sometimes it doesn't explain what they do. And I was at the Shard week before last, and I was doing a workshop with a business there with their LinkedIn profiles, And it was fascinating because when you're not intentional about what you're writing, you've got those 3 lines before you get to click for see more on that bio. You know, you've got to get on with it. You've got to make your point. And, you know, waffling and rambling on means you've lost a sentence, lost a line and a half to talking rubbish. So it's very important to make sure you're a bit tighter with what you're putting in there. And Brian, you really made a good point here. People think they need to show everything they do. It doesn't make sense to do that. What makes sense is for you to be clear to the people who would buy your service about what you offer them. So share the win. Often people talk about what they do. They don't talk enough about how they help people win. So look at my profile, for instance, on LinkedIn. I talk about creating leads and helping people close sales because that's the win they get. I don't talk about what I do. I talk about what they get. And that kind of jumps ahead and solves the problem of them having to work it out for themselves. So being clear about the win or outcome as a result of what it is people pay you for, that can really help give some clarity and save you a lot of time and extra words where you've got very little real estate to write in. Great point. Thank you, Brian. Mona Nairi here. Shout out to Mona, who's putting together the newsletter right now, finishing up on it, and it should be going out in about 3 hours time. So if you've not signed up, go to therichardmore.com/newsletter, and it's a digest of content from me, from the industry, and news about marketing and social platforms is really valuable. Mona's added in or asked, in digital marketing, things are constantly changing. What are the best practices you believe will stand the test of time? Also, are there any podcasts or groups you recommend to stay up to date and current in such a dynamic field? Really good question. And this is interesting because it is such a dynamic field that you can't go take a course that's been made much before 6 months ago because stuff moves so fast. And you know, I'm a big, I kind of, maybe an ambassador is a good word for it. I'm a big kind of supporter of LinkedIn now. And it's stunning because 2 years ago I called it, but I wasn't really doing much. And it was only March last, it wasn't 2 years ago, a year and a half, but March last year is all it was when I started posting there. But LinkedIn's become one of the platforms you should be on. And it's stunning to me that people talk about, certainly agencies, they talk about knowing social media, and they're digital agencies and they do the social media for you and they're at the cutting edge and all this stuff. And it's like, I saw an advert the other day about this, and it was someone who said, I will tell you, you know, about the top platforms you need to use for your social media. And it had Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm like, how are you credible when you're not mentioning LinkedIn now? And what it means is that if you're not right there on the front line in the trenches, you miss stuff like that because it does move fast. It is very dynamic. So I think watch carefully for those who are producing things you can learn from that are very old, because in 6 months so much changes. You know, a year ago we were probably, was it a year ago we were on Periscope and Meerkat, and then everything else is live. It's, you know, we just do it through Instagram now instead. You know, in the last few months, you can now go to YouTube and do a post with an image and text like you do on Facebook. Okay, you've now got YouTube stories. You know, stuff like this never existed, and it's stunning how a marketing manager tends to not know this kind of stuff. So it's important to make sure you're on point. And so this leads me neatly into one of the best practices to stand the test of time is being on the pitch. What you cannot do is learn stuff and then go away and that be all you've learned. That works for things like maths, right? That works for things like geography. That works for things that tend to be quite slow moving. But you need to be on the pitch, because things change so much that if you haven't got exposure to what's new in podcasting, or the slight angle on how you know, if you use documents on LinkedIn and you leverage the algorithm in a certain way, you can do better. Things like this are really important, and you will only really get it by being on the ground. So I think one of the things that stands the test of time is being on the pitch every day, show up and spend time inhabiting it. And some people come across as being very knowledgeable about digital marketing. It tends to be because those people inhabit that space. All is to say that you need to look for people, you could look for people who are holistically aware, But at the same time, there's strong value in going to people who know their one thing really well. I know plenty of people who are fantastic on YouTube, who are fantastic on Instagram, who are fantastic on just Facebook groups. But it doesn't, it doesn't mean that you discount them because they don't know about other platforms. It means you take the best from certain things. So I think what I'm saying with that is, as well as being on the pitch yourself, you should be constantly looking at who's owning that particular space. And owning that space it tends to manifest in engagement. It's not quality of content that you subjectively feel is good. It's not number of views and likes. It is the engagement they get. And I think the best examples of people who are spending time on the pitch are those that are getting great engagement, so comments and community, and they're engaging back as well. And the perfect example of it is, rather than one-word answers, you get people showing up for them. I feel that I've got this done really well with LinkedIn because the comments aren't just words. They're like nice mate or good post or something. They're paragraphs. People show up and write, meaningful comments. And I think that's important. It really makes a big difference. So there is that for sure. But the other best practice, as with anything, is to make sure you're consistent with producing content that expresses what your world is about from the position of an expert. So rather than trying to sell what you do, you share value behind your space, and that goes a long way. That value could be emotional. It doesn't have to be practical. It could be you sharing, you being intellectually aware, or you being even humorous about a particular area, but you being stimulating for people means that people are going to show up for you more and more. And I think this is a wonderful description of the way we need to treat our content and our brands these days, which is to be a bit more of a media channel. And that's true insofar as you're relevant across lots of different platforms and therefore different types of content and play. But another way to look at it is, imagine you're just a channel, a station. People show up every week, I presume, for Game of Thrones on Netflix. Why do people show up every week for you? That's the question. I'm very flattered that for 2.5 years and 1 week this week, there have been people who show up every week at this time, every Monday, to watch this show because it matters to them. And I think that's the point. It's just like posts and articles I write. If someone keeps showing up for it, it means you're creating that channel for them, and having that state of mind is important. The bottom line is this: all digital marketing should be done for a reason. So it should be intentional. It should lead to something, and that something it might lead to may well be a sale. So you need to engage with someone as well. That might be done. It's your choice. It might be done by bot, by funnel, manually, whatever it is. There needs to be something, some kind of a back and forth, a dialogue, a reciprocity in conversation, as opposed to you put out content and hope everything looks after itself from there. That's not enough of a transaction for things to tend to work. So there's a huge question but I think those best practices really have stood the test of time, and they will continue doing so. But nothing beats being on the pitch, and nothing beats helping people as a way of you're producing your content. But in addition to that, you do need to make sure you're focusing on that conversion game as well, especially as a startup. Like I said at the top of this session, making sure that you're having, at the very least, those manual conversations so you can start speaking to people and moving them to a place where they might go over the line. That isn't pressure selling. That's just getting to know someone so there's familiarity and trust, so that should they be right, they can go ahead and buy. Let's go one more question, unless there's anything else anyone wants to add here. But Daniel Nunez has asked, Richard, for a law firm, look, I'm going to a law firm tomorrow, actually, or one that works with law firms, looking to expand their presence on social media and develop a media company from the ground up. What tools and platforms would you recommend they implement to posture themselves as the premier consulting agency in those respective niches? Well, one of the companies I know who works in this space and helps law firms is a business that has a product called Lexology. And the idea of Lexology is specifically for law firms is if you join it as a law firm, you get to put up your blog posts and things like that. And they have like the biggest audience of in-house counsel at companies like Walmart or Coca-Cola or whatever, reading very regularly. They've been around for 20 odd years doing this. And what you're able to do is not just see how well your post's been read and shared and emailed and printed or whatever, which is quite impressive in and of itself, but also you can look at what's trending. So what are people actually reading about now? What's interesting? And so you can kind of magic ball it and say, well, if everyone's reading about this, I need to go read about that as well. I feel that hot on the heels of very poorly managed Facebook and LinkedIn company pages for businesses or law firms is Twitter accounts. They do have them, and it is kind of in the corporate world the next platform that people do have. They don't tend to have others beyond that. They're still 8 years behind, it seems. But they have a Twitter account, which means you can do advanced Twitter searches and look at what people are searching for. And that gives you a really exciting way of kind of testing the market and finding out what people are talking about at the moment. So there's some good tools and platforms. Lexology is a good one. I would definitely be using Twitter as well to see what people are talking about. But to develop a social media company from the ground up, what you need to be thinking is who are going to be the personalities. The business needs to have a personality. And ideally in 2019, because people, and it doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or not, you're a person first in the way you consume things. People are interested in other people. And we're conditioned in 2019 to perhaps push back emotionally or subconsciously against the positioning of a business as a strong professional brand that perhaps is, and the reason why is often because it's faceless. It will have a stock image logo. In this case, it will be, scales and a judge's wig. And that's all very nice, but that's 5 years ago when people responded to those very impressive professional images. Now we need people, because we're bored of being gamed. It doesn't work. And so as a result, we need to have people showing up as well. So you have your company logo, good for you, but where are the people? Where are the smiles? Where are the faces? And I've done this with some companies. There's been a step change in engagement when they move from stock images of, for instance, things to do with law, if it was this case, and moving to people instead talking. And it's stunning, the difference. It really makes a huge difference. And those people need to be stepping outside of just a photo and becoming personalities in that space. So the term is becoming a local celebrity insofar as the industry is concerned. So people know you as a thought leader or someone worth speaking about. There was a guy, I can't remember the name of the law firm, or the chap, in fact, but I was researching him recently, and he's published in Forbes. He sits on boards. He is moderator on lots of panels, and he's a partner at a law firm. And that's a perfect example of someone who's got a strong personal brand, who's got a thought leadership kind of brand behind him. And as a result, he'll be sought out more than the next, because humans, people, and therefore professionals, because they are humans and people first, seek out those and align with those with status. And those that have status are genuinely manifest as those who've been on certain publications and things like that. So, for instance, I'm not saying it was contrived at all. Certainly would have deserved to be there. But Michelle Raymond, who is speaking next week, is positioned as a thought leader, or positioned at a certain level of caliber as a speaker, because she's done a TEDx talk now. Those that haven't are, because of the way we live, the way we are, view other people differently. And it's like if I said, if I'd done a TEDx talk, it would position me differently. It's like saying I've released a book. Nir Eyal next week has released a best-selling book, and not one of those contrived ones where he positioned it in the wrong category in Amazon and then bought 100 copies, so he technically was bestseller for the day. He actually has got a proper best-selling book, and so that positions you as well. And I think positioning is important as a premium brand, and the way to do it is to get noise going so that people want to hook into you and say, hey, could you come right here, we'll do this. It takes time, Daniel, it does take time. But I think that for a law firm, LinkedIn couldn't be more ripe right now. And for the maybe more conservative spaces, and for the professionals and the B2B world, they should be breathing a sigh of relief, because finally you're getting LinkedIn moving to a place where it's got great application as a marketing platform, when using Facebook makes sense in so many ways, because the same people who are lawyers that you're trying to sell to on LinkedIn are, of course, over on on Facebook as well, but in a B2C capacity. So it's far more effective for B2B, the B2B space, to be using LinkedIn, especially because 80% of B2B leads are from there anyway. So they've got the platform now, and they've just got to go about it the right way, which is the CARE approach, as usual: consistent, abundant, relevant, and with engagement. And if you have those things right, then your content tends to yield the positioning as a premium brand that you're after there. Thanks so much for showing up, everyone. I hope it was good today. Good to watch so many people coming in. Gaurav, Kristen, Justin, David, Brandon, Catherine, thanks for joining in as well on Facebook. Thanks also on YouTube for following, and on the podcast.